Hey all of you awesome adventurers. Today we're going to be taking a look at some RPG horror stories. Instead of doing a long one, we're going to be taking a look at some short stories. So if you end up hearing a story you've heard before, timestamps are on the bottom. Anyway, on to the horror stories. Guy is obsessed with DC superhero. GM and I do little to help the situation. By Nightwing Guy Survivor. Throwaway, just in case he finds this. This is a story I never thought I'd post on here. It honestly isn't that bad, but I suffered from pretty bad anxiety, and for a long time, even thinking about this, and my own poor behavior in this, made me feel physically ill. This isn't a call for sympathy or justification. I know I was an asshole in this. I'm just providing some context. So I joined a Mutants and Masterminds game with a new GM. Most of the players were pretty flaky, to be honest. There were only 3 regulars including myself. One of them being a guy we'll call Rick, and the other not really being involved in this story. Even before everything went down, Rick was a little odd. He was obsessed with Nightwing. His character was literally Nightwing. This is not the horror story. I actually also liked Nightwing, and I think playing your favorite superhero in a Mutants and Masterminds game is part of the fun. However, this guy would do things like post those YouTube fan videos that are just pictures of Nightwing set to music into the Discord group chat. I found that a little odd, but hey, this guy knew I liked Nightwing, and maybe he was just trying to engage in our mutual interest. He also mentioned later on that he'd gotten rejected from another game as he gave a wrong answer, and so was applying under a different name. This was the first red flag I noticed, but hey, this was a few sessions in, and everything else had been fine. I also assumed he was quite young, 16, and I know I was kind of a brat at that age, especially because I didn't know a lot of people with mutual interest. The only other red flag up until this point had been, during one session, he had done pretty much everything, mostly due to bad rolls and decisions on my part. By pretty much everything, I mean that he was the only one who found all the information, fought the big bad guy of the session, and even saved my character's brother. I just kept rolling badly, leading to my character almost getting downed in the first round of combat, not rolling high enough to save her brother, and so on. He complained about this, and I assumed he was referring to earlier in the session, when my character had hung back, so she could infiltrate later if need be. I apologized, explaining that I wanted to have a backup plan in place, as this information was important. He still seemed a little pissy afterwards, but hey, I have no control over the dice. Things really started to kick off when he said it was about time we just made the game set in the DC Comics universe. I disagreed, mostly on the grounds that I hadn't signed up for a DC Comics game, and it felt disrespectful to the GM, although I did not say that. Since the GM wasn't responding, I argued that it didn't make sense to suddenly switch, not that Rick listened, before eventually giving up. I expected the GM to address this before the next session, but he never did. Rick also never really engaged with the NPCs in character. In the game, there was this group of superpowered children we were protecting. My character had become like a big sister to them, and the roleplay with them was honestly the best part of the game. But every time we tried to include Rick in this, like my character asking him about his backstory, he would just say he was too busy. The only NPC he did engage with was his backstory Batman, originally named Brian, but he changed that to Bruce halfway through the campaign. With all of this in mind, I drafted a message to the GM laying out my frustrations, mostly with the I want to switch to the DC comic universe thing, and the fact that he simultaneously did not engage with my character or the world, while also complaining that he had to do everything and all my character did was stand around. I ran this message and this situation by several other GMs I knew, mostly because I knew that Rick's earlier behavior had frustrated me and I was biased against him, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't the problem. I honestly should have messaged Rick privately with my concerns, but I messaged the GM instead. He responded by forwarding that message to Rick. Rick and I talked for a bit in private message, and it seemed like the situation was resolved. With that in mind, I put Discord on Do Not Disturb to work on an essay. 2 hours later, I opened Discord to see that Rick had sent me another private message, calling me a bitch and a gossip. He also posted in the main chat to say he was leaving, because he didn't want to play with people who talked about him behind his back, and everyone else was confused as all hell. The other player, whom I assumed Rick messaged, left shortly thereafter. Honestly, I should have just talked directly to Rick about my problems. It was all such petty bullshit, and he probably would have just stopped if I had just talked to him, given that he was not, as I thought, 16 at the time. He was 27. What OP did here was right. If you have a problem with another player, you need to bring it to your GM. Now in this situation, the GM was in the wrong. He didn't need to post the conversation that he had with OP. He could have had more tact when dealing with the situation. The GM could have told OP, I don't want to get into this situation, you should go and talk to Rick. And that would have been okay too. Sharing private conversations generally leads to bad situations. So this is posted over in RPG Horror Stories, but honestly it's like a 1 out of 5. Pretty funny though. This is from Worldly Importance 97. Accidental Loot Murder. So the story basically started out from a large party of 8 going to a magic shop of dwarven brothers and buying a whole load of crap there. My gnome gunslinger got some loot from some random item tables which he wanted to sell, so we ended up in the shop much later than all the other player characters, because I was crafting. Basically, I walk in and offer the shopkeep a +1 whip and the DOS loot. He says, I can pay you for the whip, but what's that loot? My character jokingly says, play it. What happens next is the dwarf going to play the lute, which I know will cause him to take 2d10 psychic damage, killing him if he strums it, and me trying to tackle him to prevent that. He beat me in the dex check, and he takes 10 damage and dies, right in front of his brothers and 5 other player characters. I panic run over to the other player characters, get a bag of holding, and stuff this poor dwarf's body into the bag. Then my party members chase down his brother so he doesn't get the guards. I then panic fly, on a broom of flying, desperately trying to find the party cleric, who only knows Revivify, and I have 1 minute to save this dwarf. Panic fly towards my best guess of where he is, shouting his name. He had literally just bought diamonds in order to cast this spell. I panic land and run over to him and just flop this dwarf's body onto the floor and beg him to revivify the dwarf. He does, and the dwarf's first question was, Where the hell am I? Also, his brother broke free and was gone. That is where we ended. Playing an instrument murdered a reasonably important NPC. The reason I'm saying this is a 1 out of 5, the player character could have just said, oh, it's a loot that will kill people. And being as he didn't, the NPC played it. But, at the same time, OP took care of the problem. So, super mild horror story, if any horror story. DM rage quits cause he can't TPK. By PG Silfer. Well, I found a group last week on Roll20 to join, cause I really wanted to play, but life wouldn't let my friends find time to. Everyone seemed super chill, the DM was organizing it, and we were gonna play Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Fine. We all had our little session 0, created characters, prepared everything, and played a little bit, cause we were done with our characters quickly. It all went fine, so we scheduled next session and kept in touch on Discord, discussing things, figuring out stuff, and some decided to switch characters. DM mentioned that we could change characters anytime before session 3. It was all fine. We started playing our session 1 today, and delved into the dungeon. We had a decent player who managed to save us from a couple fights with good roleplay. I accidentally triggered a trapped room with several shadows that was giving us trouble. My strength is very low, so I was in serious danger. We start the fight, and even though the shadows were outnumbering us in a cramped space, we managed to turn the tides and were on our way to victory. I was a druid of the land, and had a couple boars summoned to help out. I summoned them more as a distraction, so I didn't get zeroed out on strength more than anything. I ordered my summons to destroy the mirrors, that were apparently summoning the shadows, as the rest of the party were already doing that too. When the boar's turn came, the DM decided to make them attack the 2 shadows our bard had charmed, even though I specifically ordered the boars to attack the mirrors. The DM said I didn't make such a command, to which our barbarian said, Yes, he did. In his last turn. I heard it. At this moment, the DM quit the voice channel, deleted the Discord server, and deleted the entire campaign from Roll20. All we can think of is that he was mad because he couldn't find a way to TPK, or to kill me. He was mad because I summoned the boars. Not sure why. Something about too much to keep track of. So, there you go. First time I find a group on Roll20's looking for a group. I guess I'm never trying that again. And a little bit more from down in the comments. I don't understand what happened fully yet. The DM was pretty chill at the time. He didn't sound like the type that couldn't take criticism. Although, from his voice he sounded younger, around 16 or 18, while all the players were oldies. I'm 30, and most everyone else was over 40, so we don't exactly know what was going on through his head. Our eldest member mentioned, "I think we got a case of the teenage here, so it might be that." I still think he just wanted to TPK us. I guess the DM rage quit to save the players from a bad experience. Gatekeeper DM makes first-timers regret trying 5e by Pops Underhill. This happened a few years back, but it cemented my opinions on D&D and my desire to play a more cooperative game with great players and DM. A few of my friends agreed to go along with my friend and my wild ideas to get into D&D. We happened to all have a mutual friend that was dating an experienced DM. He was a good enough guy, but a bit abrasive if I'm going to be honest. After asking, he agreed to give us a good introductory game. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and we had a one-shot homebrew session, which started off with our level 1 characters on a ship, which was attacked by a kraken. Yep. Within 5 minutes, we're on a boat getting crushed. Needless to say, the boat didn't last. Somehow, we made it past that, but further details of the session involve fighting multiple monsters that were definitely too high for our party. We almost TPK'd multiple times, and my halfling rogue, which I was told by the DM was such a cop-out crap character that deserved to die, ended up getting his hand removed by a trap. End of one shot. A month later, he suggested we try Curse of Strahd, because it would be more laid out and defined. We all agreed. 5 of us players and the DM. We roll characters. Knowing the disdain for rogues, I rolled a monk. Session 1. We are in the Death House. A couple rolls that were not my expertise, but good enough, got the ire of the DM. Everyone else was doing well with their checks, and nothing too crazy as far as combat. So far, so good. We get to the basement, and see there's an altar in the center of a flooded area. My monk, not wanting to get caught in some sort of trap as everyone else was approaching it, went and investigated a large pile of bones. Found absolutely nothing. As my monk walks away, a tentacle reaches out from the pile of bones and one hits me. No saving throw, no roll for initiative. DM just states that my monk is dead. The rest of you roll initiative. No one talks for minutes. Awkwardness was palpable, but they defeat the shambling mound that had destroyed my character, and then the session ends. The DM tells me to roll a new character and send him a backstory, explaining why someone would be there and willing to join the party. I roll an older caster, not sure if warlock or wizard, it's been a while, who has been captive and tortured. Edgy, I know, but I was a newbie. Anyway, his level being 1 was supposed to be explained away by his years of torture and being out of practice with his powers. DM okays it. Game starts. DM introduces my character. I, being all in as I was, start using my voice I decided upon for the new character. An old scratchy voice. DM stops me mid-convo and asks what the voice is that I'm doing, and I told him it was my old man's voice. He says it makes no sense and to stop doing it because my character is early to mid-20s. I start to object, but he moves on. First battle we get to, my character dies. Quickly. Everyone goes quiet as the battle continues. Minimal talking as I begin and then stop rolling another character. After the combat, everyone decides to call it a short night. That group never plays together again, and only myself and one other continued playing to this day with various groups. TLDR, DM tries to scare off new players and gets offended when they try to have agency over their own characters. This sounds like a warmonger DM, one that believes that the whole purpose of his role is to defeat his players, put them into their place constantly. Either that, or he really didn't like OP intentionally trying to get them to drop out of the game. But that's at least what I think. I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. That's gonna do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.